being open to different aspects of culture, of language, of different aspects that different people bring to the society, you can communicate much easier. So I think it's that opening your mind and soul and your heart. I know it sounds very hippie, but to other people and their way to see the world.
Yeah.
So that's why we see it as weird, odd, something that it's done or said or perceived in a completely different way than that we do. But it doesn't mean it's the wrong way. It's just a different way. So just understanding that, I think it's very important.
Lexigo presents The Native Experience with your host, Brian.
Hello, world. This is Brian from Lexigo.com, and you are listening to the Native Experience Podcast, the show with the most accents. Here on this podcast, we go beyond translation and localization, and we discuss creating truly native experiences for diverse audiences. Today, we are talking with Erica Gonzalez from RMIT University, Australian Institute of Interpreters and Translators, or AUSIT. Erica is going to share some amazing thoughts on how language and culture bring people together and how she is specifically creating a truly native experience personally and professionally, among many, many other things. And so we're going to have a good time. But a little bit about Erica. She is an associate professor, as I mentioned, at RMIT University, and she is also the program manager of the Higher Education Translating and Interpreting degrees. Currently, Erica is the immediate past president of the Australian Institute of Interpreters and Translators, and under her leadership, the Institute developed the national protocols for community translations that were drafted in partnership with the Federation of Ethnic Communities of Australia and supported by the Department of Health and Aging. Erica firmly believes that quality translation services are paramount in multilingual societies like ours in order to achieve equity and cohesion. Erica is a NATI certified translator and interpreter as well, and a senior fellow of Advance Higher Education, a UK-based organization focused on providing quality tertiary education. We're going to have a lot of fun today, a lot of good conversation, so let's get into it and let's rock it. Erica, welcome to the Native Experience. Thanks for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Brian. Great pleasure.
We've got a lot to talk about today, but first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're currently doing right now.
Okay, so I'm originally from the north of Spain and migrated to Australia about 15 years ago. I'm an associate professor in translating and interpreting at RMIT University. I'm also a freelance conference interpreter and translator.
So, you stay a little busy, right?
Just a little bit. On top of that, I've got two children aged 14 and 10, wow. And I'm also the immediate past president of our professional association. So, yeah, I keep myself quite entertained.
I like that. That's better than, most people say I keep myself busy, but I love what you said there. I keep myself quite entertained. I'm going to remember that.
That's correct. Yeah, because look, unless you do things with passion and you do things because you enjoy them, what's the point? So yeah, I tend to get busier than I should, but I think that's my nature, let's say.
I think it's a wonderful thing to do that. You got to go after it with passion. Life is short. There's a lot of good things in life that you can do, but I feel like you only have time for a few right things.
Well, that's correct. And the other thing is also, I think this came from my mom or my mother, is like, if you have to do things, do them well. What's the point of being mediocre?
Yeah. Oh, that's so true.
So, yes, exactly.
Two awesome pieces of advice right there. We don't even need to go any further. We're done, right? That was it.
Yeah. Well, okay. See you next time.
Yeah, exactly. No. That was wonderful. Well, I'm even more excited now just getting those two nuggets right there. So let's do this. We have this little icebreaker round. We go through 5 questions quickly. Are you ready for this?
Let's go ahead.
All right. So the first question, if you could only speak one language for the rest of your life, what language would you choose and then why?
That's a difficult one, Brian. So I'm a native speaker of 2 languages. So that's why selecting one between the 2 of them would be very tricky. I grew up at home speaking Spanish, but then from a very young age, obviously, since the time I went to school, and I did my entire schooling in Basque, which is the language spoken in the north of Spain. It's a very ancient and old language. It's a non-pre-Indo-European language, which doesn't resemble to any other languages in the region or, for that matter, in the world. So obviously it would be Basque. Basque is spoken by a very, I wouldn't say tiny, but reduced amount of people. So Spanish is spoken in quite a few countries around the world. It's the official language of many international organizations. Could I say that I will spend half of the time speaking one and the other half speaking the other, Brian?
I will allow that. Yeah, no, that's good. I think that makes a lot of sense, actually. And I would have a hard time choosing too. So I understand that.
Yes. Yeah. So let's say 50-50.
Okay, I love it. Well, and it's I think it's neat too, because, Spanish, of course, is a very valuable language, as you mentioned, but also Basque is just such a unique thing that, like you said, a very small percentage of people can speak. So that in and of itself is very cool.
That's right. And it's a language that has fascinated linguists from, around the world, basically, because I grew up in this little village and there was like a boarding school for grown-ups to learn the language, because many public servants and government officials need to be fluent in both languages. And therefore, there was this intensive and boarding school for grown-ups in my hometown. And so I grew up seeing Japanese people, Australians. So linguists around the world would come to my little village to learn Basque, fascinated by its history, origins, etc. So that was really interesting, because suddenly you would go to the local shop and you would see a Japanese. I remember this lady, she became famous because she was the only Japanese person living in town, speaking in quite fluent Basque, because she was at that boarding school studying and learning the language.
That's neat. I didn't know the history behind that.
Yep, quite unique. Yep.
That is cool. All right. Well, if you could live in any country in the world, what would it be?
This is a tough one as well. All your questions, Brian, they make me think a little bit. I think, the world is such a fascinating place. And I guess that there's so many beautiful, interesting places. But you know what? I think that I would go somewhere where my tribe is. What's the point of being in the most beautiful place in the world if you're on your own? You've got no one to share it with. Yeah. So I guess it would be wherever my family is, my kids, my husband, or my extended family. So I think it would be a place where you've got a sense of belonging. When I've been living in other countries, for example, I started doing research for my PhD in Canada. And I remember those first few weeks in Canada, in Ottawa, like beautiful. It was, autumn was just in full swing, the beautiful colors of the maple trees. But I had that emptiness. I had the blues of missing home and my crew. At that time, obviously, I didn't have my own family. I was in this wonderful place in the world. There was just a ting of sadness that, it takes a couple of weeks for someone or a couple of months to settle. Then I had a blast. But that made me think that it doesn't matter where you are, as long as you've got your people and some sense of belonging with the local community, etc. So it would be a place where I've got my people or wonderful people around me.
That really makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad you shared that perspective too, because you're right. If you go somewhere, you always think, I don't know about everybody, but I feel like a lot of people always think, well, the grass is greener. So if I move to this country or if I move to wherever, somewhere else, it's going to be better. But it's kind of like, wait a minute though, what are you leaving? You might be.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's really wonderful.
After a conference last year, I was interpreting in Berlin for nearly 2 weeks. And on the way back to Australia, I stopped in Munich for just a couple of days to see all these Bavarian castles and whatnot. And I was in one of these beautiful places up in the mountains with a stunning view. And the only thing I was thinking about is like, I wish my family was here to enjoy this together. And it was great to be there and to be able to enjoy it, but it was not quite the same.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I was thinking about this, had a nice time with my cousins this last year. There were some beautiful parts of where we were, but it wasn't like you didn't go there for the destination of the location. We went there to see my cousins. And so I think, right. I've been to other countries, incredibly beautiful, wonderful trips. And yet this time with my cousins was almost a better experience because I was with my people. So
that's right.
Yeah, I love that. Have you ever encountered a word or a phrase that does not directly translate into another language?
Oh, there are many. The way we see the world, the way we experience things are determined by our surroundings, our culture, our religion, our education. And so even words that have a direct translation in other languages might not mean the same. As I said, the concept of cold, for example, might not be the same for me as opposed to a Canadian, right? So I think that there are many things like feelings or, I don't know, ingredients in cuisines. I could think of quite a few examples, but yeah, I think that because we're so diverse and we are all different, there are many things that actually are very difficult to translate into other languages because words have not been created in a vacuum. They've got meaning, and that meaning changes from culture to culture.
Yeah, it's so true. The idea that it takes almost an entire sentence or even a phrase to try to translate a single word from a different language sometimes, because there's just no way to really describe it otherwise, or no way to translate it. So you have to kind of explain it out.
That's right. I was with we were teaching the students this medical tool that it's used in especially mental health settings to assess where a person's at, and it's called the wheel of feelings. And the Chinese students came and was like, oh, we don't have that. But then at the same time, they had another feeling that literally meant like sour, tangy feeling to describe melancholy that we quite not have in the West.
Yeah.
So I thought that that was also really interesting because, you've got, a set of medical practitioners trying to figure out what's happening to a person, and then the person cannot identify the feelings that are explaining that wheel. So that's why I'm so passionate about translation and cross-cultural communication.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so do you have a favorite foreign language film or book?
Yeah, look, I thought about something that a film and a book that were both a film and a book. So I thought about The House of the Spirits by Chilean author Isabel Allende.
Yeah.
I like it because it mixes a bit of magic, but at the same time, the story has as the backdrop the political situation in Chile and Argentina decades back. And apart from being a very interesting family saga story, it also has all the political background, which, informs the readers or the viewers about what went on in those countries politically as well, and why it was such a massive period of their history.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, and the last one that I have here is, and this is a fun question, is what are you currently nerding out on? What are you excited about right now? What are you passionate about and having fun with?
In a month time, I'm going to be traveling to Europe for a couple of months. So obviously I'm just like getting excited about the trip. At the same time, I'm going to be interpreting at a big international conference. There's lots of studying and glossary preparation going on at the moment.
That is cool. Oh, that'll be fun.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes, it'll be fun. Minus the study part. The rest will be fun. Yes.
Oh, yeah. But I love how you're immersing in it and getting ready to go. And the whole experience is just going to be so amazing. I'm glad.
Yeah. It's a journey. And I'm taking my little one with me, my daughter. So for her, it will be also, after so many years because of the pandemic, it's going to be a big family reunion. Very nice. Really looking forward to seeing my loved ones who I haven't seen since 2018-19, some of them. So it's a long time.
Yeah. Oh, that's going to be great. Well, cool. Very cool. All right. Now, I'm curious. You mentioned a little bit on this, but I'm curious if you could go a little more into your cultural background. Again, I know you've mentioned it, but how has it influenced your life and perspective through everything you've done? I mean, I know that this is kind of a broad question, but I'm curious your thoughts on this.
Sure. Look, as I said, I was born in 1979, and Spain just emerged out of a dictatorship. My grandparents are on both sides Spanish. They were from rural areas in Spain, and with the industry kind of revolution in the Basque region, they moved there to work in factories. So my parents migrated as children to the Basque area, Basque country in the north of Spain. As I said, that was in the midst of Franco's dictatorship. So my parents, for example, they were children of Spanish migrants, so they never spoke Basque at home. My dad, as an adult, did go to clandestine night school because it was not allowed to, speak Basque or learn Basque. But growing up in an area where they realized there was another language, my dad thought it was important to speak that language. When I was born, as I said, Franco died in 1975. There was this transition to democracy. the languages other than Spanish started having prominence, and there was lots of focus on promoting these languages, etc. So I went to the school in my hometown. There were two schools, but the one my parents chose for me out of those two was the purely Basque school. So I did my entire schooling in the Basque language. So that was really convenient because I remember having conversations with my brother in Basque, and my parents could get the gist, but not 100%. So it was a very convenient thing. Sometimes my brother and I would be speaking in Basque and we didn't want our parents to get the whole thing. So at the same time, also on those days, there were not many textbooks in Basque. So I remember that in high school, my history classes were spent translating Spanish textbooks into Basque. So that was our history class. I mean, the teacher didn't do much, the paga, because he would just sit there. And in the meantime, we were translating all these historical passages about the French Revolution, the Nordic invasions in Britain, all from Spanish into Basque. So I think my passion for translation, interpreting came from those days where as a child, I spent so many hours translating because there were not appropriate textbooks or materials in our language. At the same time, it was a time where there was lots of political turmoil, very sad. Yeah. Now as an adult, I think that we internalize violence in such a manner. As a mother now, I think that, wow, it would be horrible if my kids now were exposed to that. Yeah. But it was something that we would see every day. There would be a demonstration somewhere. The police would come. There would be Molotov cocktails flying on one side, rubber bullets in the other. And we were kids like, oops, there's a demo. Let's go back home. But for us, it was such a, normal kind of thing. Now, as an adult, I see it as a very sad period in the history of the region where I grew up. So that obviously makes you think that, human beings should be so much more tolerant of each other and different views, etc. The society was so politically polarized to the point that group of friends would move depending on what your political views and thoughts were. So people wouldn't mix. If you were like more pro-Spanish, you wouldn't mix with people who were like more pro-Basque. And I find that really sad. That it's what it was.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, I'm sorry you had to go through that, but I'm glad your kids aren't going through it.
Yep.
So what do you think are some really unique features of the Basque language that you think are interesting?
The Basque language is a pre-Indo-European language. Mm-hmm. It doesn't resemble any of the languages that surround the region and other languages spoken in Spain or Europe. There have been different theories. Some of them, I would say that it's linked to Berber languages in Africa. Others say that it might be linked to Georgian in the Caucasus. So there were different theories. But then when DNA testing was possible, they saw that there were not real relationships between the peoples. Now the most convincing theory is that it's a language that was basically born there and evolved in that particular region because it's very mountainous, rough, and it was never, as the rest of Spain, when Islam was quite a big part of Spain and the Moors came to Spain. That region of ours was always quite, so to speak, I'm talking in very general terms, preserved because they never got up to there because of the rough terrain, mountains, and the geography of the area. And the same thing with other groups that came later. Obviously, there's been always contact with people from the Iberian Peninsula, but as I said, the most plausible theory is that it's a language that was born and evolved in that particular region with no connections to other languages.
Okay.
And it's funny because if I say something in Spanish, for example, gracias, thank you. In Basque, it's eskerrik asko.
Oh, interesting.
They don't even sound similar at all. So people always get quite fascinating about Basque language because of that, because it doesn't resemble anything nearby.
That's fascinating. It really is, because you're right. Most of the time, if there are neighboring countries or two languages or more, in a specific country, they're similar. It's just more of a dialect kind of thing, different wordings, but it's not that different. But that's fascinating that it's completely different.
And also it's a language that is spoken by about, I don't know, let's say probably 1 million people, maybe a bit less. But there are also 7 dialects. Some of them have died, but to be such a language, it's such a small number of speakers. It's got 7 dialects, which is also quite fascinating.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Wow. I appreciate hearing about that because that's all new to me. So that's really neat. Now, taking a step back in general, I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are. How do you think language and culture intersect and influence each other? Because this actually could go even into what you were just talking about.
Oh, absolutely. I think that both things are not isolated from each other. Language is culture. Culture is also language. So I think that these 2 elements cannot be separated, and they form, a massive pillar in someone's identity or in a country, region's ID, basically. Look, I was just looking to give you proper facts. The Basque language is spoken by 28.4% of Basques in all territories. Of these, 93% are in the Spanish area of the Basque Country, and the remaining 6% are in the French portion. Because, the Basque Country is divided between France and Spain, and that's why people seeking independence. And that's why we had a political conflict where independence was sought from Spain. And so that's why it's important to recognize that it's divided in 2, the Spanish part and the French part.
Okay, excellent. I'd like to know what you think about how language and culture can be used to bring people together, and then also how it can be used to create barriers, or how it's been used to create barriers.
Language is a powerful tool we've got, obviously. It can bring people together because at the end of the day, people, I guess, are also curious about other people and other languages. Yeah. But at the same time, for example, let's think about Australia or other countries which have received waves of migration. When you migrate somewhere and you've left everything behind, your words, language is the only thing you're bringing with yourself, basically. Then you get to a country, people who might be a bit reluctant on migration or might feel a bit funny about people who speak other languages. And just think how you would feel when you go somewhere and you're trying to enjoy your rights as a citizen and also fulfill your responsibilities and commitments towards that country. Yeah. It's really difficult to achieve unless you speak the language. And I can imagine the frustrations, the pain that must cause people to go to a doctor and not be able to understand what they are telling you. That's why interpreters and translators fulfill such a massive role in multilingual societies like ours. Yeah. According to the latest census in Australia, we speak more than 400 languages, if I'm not wrong. It is important to understand that language can be a massive barrier. And there's nothing worse to me to be somewhere where you cannot understand what's going on around you. The feelings of frustration, of pain must be enormous. And I know that some people would say, oh, these people come to our country, they should learn English. Yeah. Well, in theory, yes, but some people might have, poor schooling in their own countries because they had to work. Like my grandmother, she was oldest of 6 kids and she was working since she was 14, looking after all her siblings and also tending the land the family owned. So her schooling was very poor and basic. So I can imagine if my grandmother would have migrated here, she probably would have to rely on interpreters or translators. Yeah. Some people then work really hard, don't have time to learn the language. And these are people who are contributing to our economy and to our society. So yes, that's why I think language also can be a divisive issue if the measures, the remedies are not put forward to support those who don't speak the language.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, even going on the barriers, I feel like, I've experienced this too, but have you experienced the barriers where it's not just, I don't understand what they're saying, but also does it create a division like, well, because I don't understand what they're saying, they're not going back to, like you said, my people, my tribe, my community, they're just, do you see that? Do you see people kind of just saying, nope, they're not my people?
In general, especially here in Australia, I think we're pretty lucky compared to other parts of the world. In all societies, there are racist people. And in all societies, you're going to find people who just do not, want to know about others. They don't open their heart and mind. They are numb, so to speak. But in general, I think that we've got quite a thriving multilingual, multi-ethnic, multicultural society. And I'm a person who always like to, focus on the positives. Of course, there are always rednecks, to use a very colloquial term, who are not interested in knowing about these new neighbors or these other people, know. Yeah. But I do also think, Brian, that this comes from a place of ignorance.
Totally.
From ignorance and maybe their own lack of exposure, relationships with people from other backgrounds, because I'm sure that many of these people, especially, I'm not talking about people who border, terrorist organizations like neo-Nazi groups or whatnot, but your regular neighbor who might be a bit of as we said, redneck, let's put it that way. Yeah. Probably they're not bad people. They, just your regular citizens who never had the opportunity to spend a bit of time with people from other backgrounds or to travel and see how wonderful the world is thanks to the diversity, the different languages, cuisines, colors. So I do believe that sometimes this comes from ignorance as well.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you saying that, and I appreciate you differentiating those two, because, I was thinking more on the side of the person who's just, like you said, they're more ignorant, they're more lazy, they're more just like, I'm comfortable with my people, I'm comfortable with my language and the way that I do things, and I'm just not interested. So it's a division, which is, and I don't like that either, because I'm one of those, I'm like, you're missing out.
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
But I also think that as humans, we're very tribal.
Yes, we are.
I think that among my group of friends, I've got people from who knows how many nationalities. Look, I've got a little mom's group in my daughter's school that we go for coffee or dinners every now and then. So we've got a Turkish lady, Sarah is Welsh, Basque Spanish, Rina is English, but from Indian background, of parents who migrated to England from South Africa. And then there's another one who is Australian with Greek heritage. And then it's a proper Aussie who is the only one who was born and grew up in the suburb where we're living now. So imagine in this small group of moms, the diversity we've got. And I find it so fascinating. But then at the same time, I've got my Spanish speaking moms group, and it's wonderful to share, some humor. We share a background. We are all about the same age. So we grew up listening to the same radio programs, the same television. Oh, nice. And sometimes just the humor also lies in past shared experiences, or the conversation flows. You remember on telly on those days. And obviously, speaking your own language, sometimes, it's just easy. So I've got my mixed group of friends, but I also like to spend time with people who share my same backgroround.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, so I think, and we're really lucky here in Australia, because most of us have the chance to experience that, the rich diversity the country offers, because we've got such a rich social tapestry. But at the same time, many of us have the opportunity to still develop good relationships with our own linguistic and ethnic communities. And that comes a bit, I guess, from our tribal background as human beings, I guess.
Yeah, that's so true. We were talking about tribalism, actually, and even just you go to a sports game and, it's this team versus this team, and they're ready to rip each other's throats out, and you're just going, wait, let's just have fun. But how do we get to this? Yeah, it's still very active, unfortunately. Very much alive, tribalism is. I got to tell you, too, that podcasting has been a really interesting opportunity to get to connect to the world. The internet, of course, too, but it's amazing. You think about maybe 15 years ago, 10, let's say 10 to 20, but somewhere in there. Because I even think 10 years ago, it just felt so much smaller. But I think about every kind of conversation, influence, whatever you want to call it, opportunity, experience. Most of them came from your local community, with people within your essential neighborhood, unless you went somewhere, like if you traveled to a different country, then you would experience it. And now, being a podcaster, having these opportunities to talk, I'm talking to people from all over the world all the time now. This is amazing. So, technology has its downsides, but I got to tell you, this is cool.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, it's so neat. Hey, are you tired of... I almost scared myself right there. I'm so excited about this. I got to ask you this question. Are you tired of spending hours transcribing audio or video content? Do you want to create accessible content for a wider audience, but struggle with time-consuming subtitling and translation? Seriously, I've got a great idea for you. You ready? Introducing Scribe, the effortless solution for transcription, subtitling, and translation. With Scribe, you can transcribe speech to text in record time, create on-brand subtitles instantly, and translate and create subtitles across 171 languages in minutes. You know, that's pretty freaking amazing. Just my 2 cents as the host, by the way. Reach more audiences and create accessible content in any language for any platform, anywhere. Try Scribe today and see how it can transform your media content creation process. Head over to Lexico.com/scribe. Check it out. Do you have a cultural experience apart from your own, by the way? Do you have one that you can share that is, again, either personal or business that has impacted you in a big way?
It was when I was a young interpreter in Spain, working a fair bit with asylum seekers and migrants from sub-Saharan African regions. Obviously, they were speaking in English because we didn't have interpreters for their languages, and many of them would speak English as a second or third language, but most of them were pretty fluent, especially Nigerians, where English, has a very solid presence. And I remember that once we were processing the asylum seeking claims for this person, and they had to tender all the evidence they had to support their claim that they were genuine refugees or asylum seekers. And suddenly this person gets a piece of paper and the police says, "Oh, can you do a side translation of this? Or could you translate that in the lunch break?" And I'm like, look at the paper, and it was a voodoo contract.
Oh,
and
wow.
I'm like, oops. And I'm like, oops, this is like, yeah. And the person was talking about black magic, and
wow.
this person started to levitate. And I'm like, hang on a minute. I was like, oh, this is like surreal to me. That's possibly the most distant, remote, bizarre cultural experience I had. So translating a voodoo contract was definitely interesting.
No, that is interesting. Wow.
Yeah. So basically, people who were trafficked into Europe, especially those who would come via illegal means, they would contact the mafias in their home countries or neighboring countries. There were big mafia syndicates to traffic people. So in order to make sure that these people were going to pay the debt to bring them through Mauritania, Morocco, and then into Spain, they would have to sign a contract, and that was a voodoo contract.
Wow.
So yeah, it was like, oops, weird. For me, it was very bizarre. I don't want to say weird because, I'm making the mistake that many people say, oh, because it's different, but it's weird. But to me, it was definitely very alien, and it felt rather daunting and strange.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. Well, no, and you're right about that. It does feel alien to us that are not involved with that or anything like that. But that would be difficult to do. It's kind of like, okay, well, this is uncomfortable. I don't know how do I translate this because I'm not a part yet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the translator. You have to be accurate and you have to be faithful towards the source text. So it was like, okay, let's just do a bit of research here and get this through so that the police can assess it properly.
Yeah. Sounds like you've had a lot of interesting experiences with your work. And I was wondering what you most enjoy about what you do.
Making possible that people understand each other. When you are at the community level, when you see that someone can follow their doctor's treatment or that someone's got a fair go in the justice system because they had a proper interpreter, that's, I think, a big satisfaction. And then in big international conferences, the fact that the world can understand, the people participating in world affairs can understand each other because of the good work of interpreters, that's a massive satisfaction, that knowing that you are allowing someone's participation in a meeting because you're doing a good job. And that's why I take my job very seriously. Yeah. I study thoroughly before going to a conference. I prepare extensively because I feel such a responsibility over my shoulders that it can be quite daunting. It's the pressure, if you mess it up, you could create another word, but not always, obviously. But I take it very seriously because I'm being someone's voice, enabling someone to be understood. I'm enabling people to communicate so that everyone negotiates under equal footing, so to speak, or conditions. So Yeah. And that's why I love my job.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Tell us a little bit about your role with the Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Communities Health Advisory Group, and also talk about how that group is providing Native experiences in general.
Well, that group is quite a unique group, Brian, because it truly shows the will and interest in getting a group of experts, of people who have deep knowledge about multilingual, multicultural communities in Australia. And it's the first time where I've seen the government, community, grassroots organizations, academics, experts, scientists work together towards the common goal of providing accurate and quality information to our multilingual communities in Australia. My involvement in that advisory group was as the president of the Australian Institute of Translators and Interpreters. I'm no longer the president, but I still keep representing AUSIT as the immediate past president. When you are communicating from one language into another, and when I heard about the creation of this group, I sent an expression of interest because I thought translators and interpreters have a great role to fulfill. Yeah. And AUSIT, as the peak professional body in Australia representing the translating and interpreting profession, I thought that we should have a seat in that advisory group. So my work basically is focused on providing expertise, my experience regarding the translation process. And some really good work has emerged from that. For example, we set up a working group among the people at the Department of Health and Aging, the Federation of Ethnic Communities of Australia and AUSIT, and we developed national protocols for the translation of community information. We also developed some style guides that would help translators, in future translations with healthcare materials, etc. I think that this collaboration, this cooperation is really important, and it shows that there's goodwill, and when there's goodwill, good outcomes can be achieved. And I think that Australia, compared to other multilingual nations, it's in a leading position regarding, how we produce information for people who don't read or understand English. Many mistakes were made, but that's human nature. We're not perfect. But to me, the lesson was that instead of procrastinating or just being defensive about those errors or how we did things, action was taken. And it was prompt, immediate, and very efficient, effective action. And that's something to applaud. There's still many things to do. The road's still long, but I believe that if we keep working together with expertise from so many angles and with such varied degrees of knowledge and experiences with multilingual or CALD communities, as we call them in Australia, culturally and linguistically diverse communities, I think that good outcomes can be achieved. And that's super positive.
Yeah. I love it. I love the positive aspect of it, and I love what you're doing. And like you said, you're going to make mistakes, but that's okay because you're constantly learning and growing and moving forward, and you're trying to do the right thing too, which is great. So
that's correct. That's correct. And look, I think as humans, we can only, acknowledge if there have been mistakes or if, you've taken the wrong strategy. There's nothing like acknowledging it and then just getting, thinking caps together to address and remedy the situation.
So speaking of learning moments and making mistakes and overcoming those mistakes, how did you learn to communicate effectively with people from different languages and cultural backgrounds? Because, you obviously are doing that right now. How did you do that?
You have to be very aware that we're different. And sometimes it happens with me with friends from different backgrounds. A friend, like, for example, she asks without please, can you do this for me? And I'm like, how rude. But it's like, I'm realizing it's not that. It's that for example, in Spanish, we don't say please and thank you as many times as the Brits do. Like my hubby's English and, at the beginning, he was like, you're so rude. You never say thank you or please. It's like, because in a familiar environment, you don't have to, it's just being aware that we are all different. And sometimes it doesn't mean that the other person's doing something wrong. It's just because that's the way they do things. So being open to different aspects of culture, of language, of different aspects that different people bring to the society. If you're flexible with that, I think you can communicate much easier. So I think it's that opening your mind and soul and your heart. I know it sounds very hippie, but to other people and their way to see the world.
Yeah.
So that's why we see it as weird, odd, something that it's done or said or perceived in a completely different way than that we do. But it doesn't mean it's the wrong way. It's just a different way. So just understanding that, I think it's very important.
I like what you said there. That's very interesting because I'm thinking too from this perspective of, I guess if it's not a malicious activity or, I don't intend harm, then you're right. It's just different. And people, at least here in the US, people are easily offended these days, and it's kind of ridiculous. So I always have to step back and just say, are you listening? Let's listen. Let's understand each other first, and let's understand the motive behind it. It's probably not intended. There's probably no harm intended. It could be. And if that's the case, then okay, that's a different story. But if there's no harm intended, let's try to, learn where they're coming from and what they're doing. Not to mention, you've got cultural backgrounds, you've got language differences, and then you've also got personal experiences. So,
well, exactly. Yeah. And also that's very important, Brian, because it doesn't mean because I'm Spanish, I'm going to have a siesta every day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's also really important because our own personal journeys, experiences also differentiate us from our own cultural group. So it does sound a bit complex and it's like, oh, how overwhelming. But no, it's just, as I said, it's about being open and being a little more understanding about others.
Definitely.
And as you say, as long as it's not done in a malicious manner, then why not? Just let's afford other people also the freedom to express themselves in the way they feel more comfortable expressing. And as you say, these days, people get offended really easily. I also think that we've become too politically correct.
Oh, yes.
Sometimes. Oh, gosh. It's like our society is becoming a bit vanilla. Yeah. It's good that there's a bit of political correctness because obviously, you need some filters. But sometimes I think we've gone way too extreme to the other side. So, I think we need a balance.
I always like to say that if you can learn how to respect the next person to the best of your ability, of course, no one's going to be perfect at that, then you don't need political correctness. Because if you're being respectful to somebody, then there's no need for being politically correct because you're already loving and respecting them. There you go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that the only boundaries that need to be observed are those that have to do with legal matters that rule countries. For example, if someone says, we marry really young in my culture, but in Australia or the US for that matter, or other countries, probably you cannot marry a child. You know what I mean?
Well, sure. Yeah, that's true.
Those are the only boundaries that we need to respect, those that have to do with the way things have set up in a society to protect the citizen. And then that's when culture or people, even if they do things in a different manner, those kind of legal frameworks have to be, especially when it has to do with human rights, then I'm sorry, but you have to abide by the legal framework of the society where you're living.
My belief is always, if I'm going to go to another country, then I'm going to learn their customs, their culture, as much of their language as possible. And I'm going to go there and I'm going to respect them. Even though I am not one of them, I don't live there, so I might make a mistake. At least my goal is to respect, because I'm on their land. I'm in their culture. Yep. I'm not going to impose my culture and my land on them because I'm I'm with them. I'm hanging out with them. So for me, it's to go and respect them and be there. And I think, a number of people do a nice job of that. It's not always the case, but I think most of the time it's good.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that it would be good to focus on the positives. I think most people do the right thing. There's always, and as I said, in any society, there's always bad apples and
of course,
people who just do not comply. But in general, I think people, accommodating. And as I said, the US is a completely different context, Brian, but at least in Australia, we enjoy a pretty, diverse, rich, multilingual, multicultural society. And it's one of the beauties of this country. As I said, according to the latest census, we don't only speak more than 400 languages, including Australian Sign Language and indigenous languages, but also more than half of us were born overseas or have one parent who was born overseas. That's a really huge percentage when it comes to diversity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes this country so unique and fantastic.
Yeah.
The fact that, even in my neighborhood here, in my little street, you see people from so many backgrounds and so many different linguistic origins. And I think that's fabulous because the world, I believe, would be very, very boring if we would all be the same.
So true.
So, yes.
I know. Well, I live here in the U.S., but I prefer foreign foods, to the U.S. That is, I don't like to eat American food very often. It's boring, So I'm with you. It's like there's so many interesting cultures and so many things to learn about and experience. And I'm like, yeah, I love that. I love the diversity. I love the differences. So interesting.
So interesting. Exactly. And I think food is one of those things, Brian,
Oh, yeah.
as you very well said. It's like my husband's English, for example, and I'm like, poor dude, he would be eating baked beans all day long if it wasn't for, the beautiful foods that were introduced and cuisines to England, but also Australia. That's why, we are spoiled for choice. You could have Vietnamese on Monday, Greek on Tuesday, Italian on Wednesday, Chinese on Thursday. So, and the list goes on.
I love it.
Yeah.
Now I'm getting hungry. I'm curious how you think language and technology is going to continue to evolve in the future. As we move forward, what do you think is going to happen?
That's such a great question. Look, I think people are scared, especially in my industry. They are scared thinking that machines are going to take over their jobs. And I think that's the case for many professions because machines are getting better and better. Artificial intelligence, machine translation is evolving at really rapid rates, and the results we're getting are pretty awesome. However, I do believe that technology is not going away. We cannot prevent it from, advancing. So I think the best solution we've got is to embrace it and to go along with it because there will always be the need for a translator to sort out cultural cues, things that the machines haven't caught up with. We always said that even if you get machine translation, you really need a human to, have that second check, that final revision for interpreting the same. There are some human interactions where machines would not. Machine interpreting, I'm sure we'll get to that point as well. But for the time being, I think we're still years ahead, and I hope I'm right, of, having a complete takeover by machines. It's it is already disrupting the language and translating and interpreting industry. But I think we cannot be afraid of the changes. We just have to go along with them and embrace the changes because otherwise, there was a saying once in a conference that they said translators won't be replaced by machines. They'll be replaced by translators who know how to work with machines.
And that's true. You're right. Technology is not going away. Embrace it, utilize it. It's a tool. That's really all it is. It's not a replacement. I think people are worried about, but it really is a tool. And like you said, you can translate language, but you can't necessarily translate culture and meaning and understanding. And
exactly.
You go and you talk with somebody, and that's a completely different experience than reading something on the internet or having something translated to you. So,
exactly.
You can't replace that. I'm curious how you do this, but also I'd love any and all advice for any of us too. How do you strive to always provide a truly native experience, personally and professionally? You can do either way, but what is your advice for that based on how you do it?
I think it's being true to yourself. I also think that maybe I'm going back to the early migrants to, Australia, the Aboriginal people in Australia, Indigenous people in Australia have been around for 60,000 years. But when, I'm just focusing more on the migration wave after the Second World War. But when people started to come in massive ways to populate Australia, there was this tendency, and I've seen it with some older migrants, of wanting to assimilate and wanting to, blend with the main majority culture. And some of them changed their names, their surnames, just to be more English, if you like, so that they could fit in better, and so that probably their kids' lives would be easier. And I think that we are moving away from that. And I'm very proud of, of having an accent, even if my kids sometimes laugh. I never changed my surname, for example, when I got married, because it's who I am. Yeah. And with Erica, quite an English and sounding name. I thought like if I change my surname, it's like what's left from my heritage. It's like, no, I'm keeping my surname. So I think we see more of that, more of, people keeping their names, their surnames, but also of being proud of who they are without having to assimilate the new culture. And so that's why I think providing a native experience should be not highlighting, but being proud of who you are, your roots, your accent, your background, because at the end of the day, we are a tiny part of that very colorful tapestry of societies that have been forged thanks to centuries of migration. So I think that to provide a native experience, you also have to be true to yourself and be proud of who you are.
I love that, because you're right. I think that's incredible. Not only are you relating to the other people where they're at in their language and their culture, but you're not changing who you are, your language, your culture, your background. I love that. I think that's perfect.
Excellent.
Yeah. Thank you, Erica. I thank you for taking this time. This was fun. It was a fun conversation. I would love to have you back on. I definitely want to hear about the conference too when you get back.
Thank you so much. Yeah. My pleasure, Brian.
Wow. Great stuff. Erica Gonzalez, Associate Professor and also immediate past president, current global platform partnerships at RMIT University as well as OSIT. Thank you, Erica. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate you listening and joining us. Don't forget to subscribe to the show, by the way. If you're not already subscribed, don't miss an episode. There's so much more coming. We have a lot of information. And of course, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your questions, your comments, your thoughts, all of that stuff. Send it over on an email, nx@lexigo.com. Once again, that is nx@lexigo.com. And I'll tell you what, we've got a lot of great people coming on the show, probably some coming back. It's going to be really exciting. But anyway, thank you for listening. Join us on the next episode. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for taking the time. And remember, always strive for authenticity and embrace the power of native experiences. See ya.